Hi, everyone. Dr. Micah Hamilton here, and we're back with the Epigenetic Performance Series. I'm gifted once again by Noto, intimacy coach. And for those of you who watched our last time together, we talked about keeping intimacy and sensuality alive in times of crisis. If you haven't heard that, I'm going to have the link to the YouTube event in the show notes. And so I would encourage you to go back and see Lee's tips on how to actually do that right now, because they were really powerful. Today, we're going to talk about modern day Tantra and really sacred sexuality in the 21st century. And it's interesting because it's a conversation I think that many are unsure of. And so with Lee today, we're going to be able to really talk about some things, some misunderstandings about Tantra, really a balanced lens, I think, of Tantra, and bringing sort of the ancient to the modern. And so, Lee, let's jump in. Let's talk about what Tantra is first, so that we can kind of dispel some of the myths and some of the discomfort that some people might have around it.
Sure, welcome. Absolutely. It is such a pleasure to be back with you here. And so when we talk about the concept of Tantra, it is far deeper than a lot of us here in the West have had the great pleasure of getting to know. And so Tantra is a spiritual science, and it's ancient. It dates back to over 7,000 years ago from ancient India. And when we break the word down itself, Tan means expansion and Tra means liberation. So quite literally, the spiritual body of Tantra means to expand your consciousness or to go through the process of expansion in order to attain liberation.
It's I love that because it makes it so clear and really does pull out what so many in the Western world think of as a kind of sex, and so tie Tantra in the way you just described it to the way you teach intimacy and sort of modern day, more of the modern day urban kind of Tantra practices.
Yes. So what I love about Tantra is that it is a body of practice that acknowledges that we are in a material world and we are in physical bodies. This is the life that we stepped into. And it uses that not as a way to try and escape the physical 3D world we're in as a means of ascension, but as a way to create and find the God or the source within us. And so it uses the very thing that a lot of other spiritual practices see as the limiting factor, as the very tool and agent itself for enlightenment. I mean, how cool is that, first of all?
Right. So what about when we talk about embodying, right? So if our essence, if our source, if the battery that powers this expression, right, here at this time is right beyond what many of us currently even have, I think, you wouldn't say capacity to really know, but from our indoctrination, from our cultural editors telling us that it's we're born into sin and we're this one-time use, that physicality is bad, right? Any kind of pleasure of the body of self or other is something to do this to, right? I think it's important for us to really look at how that has informed the way a lot of people think about sexuality, sex, sensuality, anything around it, and what our potential for embodying into the pleasurable aspects of our being is. So can you tie those two together, please?
Yes, absolutely. So, yes, we have been very, very deeply indoctrinated. And I'm sure you could speak to this from an epigenetic lens around how beliefs and traumas are carried through our bodies, not only in our direct lineage, so my mother and her mother and her mother, etc., but in the construct of race and ethnicity, in the construct of sexual orientation, in the construct of gender identification. We carry these ideas or concepts about what it means to be a certain thing, a woman, a heterosexual woman, an American heterosexual woman, etc. And so what I love here in this practice is that we can use anything and everything as a learning opportunity. And you and I were talking about this before we hopped on this call, is what can we use in our direct environment as a means to learn and grow and develop? Because we are meaning-making machines as humans. So if we're going to make meaning no matter what, and we have free will and agency, then what meaning do we want to make of what's here for us right now? So what meaning do we want to make of our sexuality? How do we want to approach our sexuality? How do we want to approach our shame around sexuality, trauma around sexuality, beliefs around sexuality? And so we have the opportunity now more than ever to have an open conversation with ourselves and with those around us that asks, okay, how can we use what's here as a way to serve our growth and expansion as individuals and as a collective? And that, in essence, in my opinion, is what brings us back to our source, to this infinite collective consciousness, is always being on the path of relentless growth and expansion towards something bigger.
I love that, relentless growth and expansion. Yeah. That is, to me, that is disciplined, right? Mm. And what I'm watching is sort of this laser type vector of I'm going to explore this, right? And I think this is important to talk about because especially and I always say this, I can only speak to myself as a woman and heterosexual woman. I was brought up in the indoctrinated, holy roller religion of anything that was tied in sex to any way was bad, wrong, negative, gonna go burn in hell if you have a thought of something feeling pleasurable, while at the same time having the pleasurable feelings and this tug of war in my mind of, oh my God, that feels good. No, it's not allowed to feel good because you're going to go burn in hell if it feels good, right? And so there was this war in my being of an innate, beautiful, natural, pleasurable feeling and not allowed to have it, right? Yeah. And so that began to set up all these belief systems that then clouded my sensual sexual experiences, even to the point of me feeling like it was not okay to have sexual intercourse with my husband. I mean, and that sounds crazy, right? It sounds crazy. But I found that I had to do a lot of work on all those belief systems because there were a lot of stuck stories around all of it. Yeah. And it probably took me years, right, to move through in a way of delayering all of those belief systems to get to what I now know to be a natural state of human performance, right? Of the rich nature of pleasure in the physicality and the pleasure that is created in connection to self and other. And so I wonder, I know we're going to move into talking about Tantra itself and the masculine and feminine aspects of that, but do you have thoughts on how someone who finds themselves to have belief systems that are kind of at odds, or internal thoughts that are kind of at odds in this way, how to get to those? Because I think that would be so helpful.
That's such a powerful question, because inevitably, I would say 99.999% of the population is at odds with ourselves, especially as it relates to sexuality, at least here in the West. And so if we took a step back for a second, I might ask, okay, through what lens are we looking at this? Are we looking at ourselves through? And so if we can put on the glasses of curiosity and almost tap into this sort of mad scientist archetype that is, just out to observe without judgment and without attachment, then can we start to ask questions through that lens? And so one, I would say, is, can we observe anything and everything about ourselves, even if it feels limiting or challenging or indoctrinated, with a sense of curiosity and non-judgment? And so a statement or a question might be, okay, in realizing that I was raised in the Catholic religion, know that I have been brought up with a lot of shame around sexuality, and that is okay. I feel fear when I go to have intercourse with my husband, and that is okay. And starting to create a safe space within ourselves and within the dialogue we're having for everything to be equally welcome at the table. And so the fear has a place at the table, the joy, the curiosity, everything has a place at the table. Because if we want to look at transformation and growth and expansion, we have to first acknowledge where we are, because then we can set a GPS point to where we want to be. And then we know what path to walk. And so
I love that, because it's strategic and also going into the tactical. Keep going.
Right. And so first thing is looking at things through a lens of curiosity and non-judgment. And then starting to, with that lens, ask questions. Hey, where did I get this belief from? Is this belief mine? Is it something I still believe? Is it something that I intuit serves my purpose here or my highest growth? And really just allowing a space for the answers to arise, again, with curiosity and non-judgment, and a place for whatever comes up to be there. Because in the work that I've done with clients and in myself as well, because I was raised in religion too, is there was anger, there was fear, there was confusion, there was frustration. I mean, at an entire system, at an entire collective, and I didn't know what to do with it. So asking those questions with curiosity, and then allowing a space for those emotions and experiences to move through our body. And one of the things that I'm sure will come up is 3 ways to move energy through our body, which is through breath, sound, and movement. And using those ancient technologies to allow ourselves to feel the emotion of something that may or may not be ours, but has been held on to by our collective for thousands and thousands of years.
And so I know that you are. I know that you're having a master class. I'm actually going to put it up now, and I'll put it up again also. But I have already registered for this master class, and it's a free master class. Lee has graciously taken, her years of training and wisdom, and put it in this beautiful masterclass. It's at www.untamedintimacy.com. And you can go and register. And it is April, tell me the date again, Lee, I can't recall the date.
April 4th.
April 4th. And so, so make sure you go and register for this class, because this is going to be truly spectacular. I can't wait. All right, I'm going to take that off. Okay. So, I think that as we all begin to look at, right, why we believe what we believe about this, what are the barriers that are keeping us from being truly intimate with ourselves and intimate with whomever we're choosing to be intimate with, without shame, without, what is it, when you lack self-confidence, when you feel like something is just not right with you, those things take up a lot of bandwidth from an energetic perspective, and actually create barriers between myself and another, right? And so these are things that we can collect back, right, to take the lenses away, to actually be more intimate and closer with ourselves and with another.
Yes, absolutely. And we all have this deep innate desire for love and connection with others, and that truly starts with cultivating love and connection and intimacy with ourselves. So often we want to outsource that to someone else to be responsible for the connection and love that we feel. And you hit it spot on in saying that really starts within. That starts with cultivating that in relationship to ourselves first.
And so are you going to talk about that in your masterclass, Self First?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. So let's, one of the things that I have been watching people talk about really across the planet lately, and really, I mean, in the last few years, is this thing called masculine and feminine energy. And so you hear people talk about warrior masculine, divine masculine, archetypal male female, but it doesn't mean male female. Why don't you talk to us about masculine feminine energy, what it actually means, and how we can really work within ourselves to become a balanced being through these two types of energies?
Absolutely. So, like you said, masculine and feminine energy have nothing to do with gender identification. And it's easy to get that impression because we associate masculinity with men and femininity with women. But in this context, these words refer to attributes that we all contain. So we all contain masculine energy. We all contain feminine energy. And, other ways to refer to this are yin and yang. And so when you think of yin and yang, it's the perfect polarity. And we each strike that polarity within ourselves and in relationships with others. So when we think of masculine and feminine attributes, there are certain qualities that characterize masculine and feminine. So I'll give an example of a few. Masculine energy is very directive energy. It is precise, it is penetrating, it is direct, it is organizing, it is linear, it is analytical. And that's just a few. Mm-hmm. And then feminine energy is creative, it's nourishing, it's regenerative, it is free-flowing, it is nurturing. And yes, while we typically associate these qualities with men and women respectively, we all have the capacity for all of this and more. And so the way I have found, and in everything I've studied, to really live a life of fulfillment is to understand what the balance within ourselves in our masculine and feminine energy is in any given moment, and know that it's always shifting and ever changing.
And so, it's so interesting that you say notice within yourself. This 30 years in the military that I just finished, I showed up almost always in total masculine energy, right? Mm-hmm. I was every one of those things that you just listed. And I would say there was not even 10% of the feminine characteristics. There's certainly very little nurturing, right, that went along with that. After I retired, I realized I needed to understand what that feminine nature meant. And so it took me down an interesting road, right, where it doesn't mean doing my hair and putting on makeup, which I didn't do either, right? But really being aware of how much of my total being I'm bringing to each environment, right? Each encounter, and really allowing that oscillation between what is required, so that I'm not thinking about how much of this masculine and this feminine I'm currently experiencing, but more knowing that I'm in this beautiful oscillation between the two states, right? So it's just simply being what is called for in each moment. Yes?
Yes. And here's a great example of this and how we can cultivate this within ourselves. Because you're right, while it can feel wonderfully replenishing for us to put on makeup and do our hair, it is not the entirety of what feminine energy depicts. Right. And so when we think of the masculine is the container, that which contains all. And the feminine is this infinite, free-flowing energy. And in actuality, if feminine energy were left unbounded, it would flow off into the ether with very little grounding and very little action in the real life world. And so it requires a sense of masculine energy to contain it, so that it can be shaped and molded and formed into something that is then usable. And so if the feminine energy is left unbound, then it will float into the ether and ultimately really become nothing. And if the masculine energy is left unbound, generally what we find is it creates epic amounts of burnout and a very direct bulldozing-like force. And by the way, I can relate to that 110%, because that is the life that I came from as well. And so within ourselves, we can create a container of safety, because truly this divine masculine that you're referring to is the thing that contains the feminine. And so Ani, my partner, put it beautifully the other day. He said, "You are the feminine and you contain all. I am the masculine and I contain you." And so within the feminine, we are everything. We are raging and we are angry and we are passionate and we are joyous and we are orgasmic. And in order to fully express in that way, we have to feel safe and contained, and not constricted, but contained, so that we can know that we're not going to float off into the ether.
Wow. I love this, because it opens up so many things in my mind. And, the one in particular that is the strongest at the moment is so if I knew myself, right, as that masculine strength, the leader who gets shit done, because I'm really good at that. And my partner, my husband, knows himself also as, right, the surgeon who is very good at what he does. And both of us are sitting in this very strong masculine doing energy. There can be a bit of conflict if we're both sitting in what I call masculine archetypes. So by birth, I'm a soldier, and by birth, he's a monk. And so early on, we found our very strong masculines wanting to be in charge. And we very quickly learned that when one of us was in that strong masculine, the other needed to pivot and go into more of a supportive, almost devotee role of the other in that strong masculine strength. Can you talk about why that's important? I mean, we don't even think like this. We don't go, well, we're both being really, really like doer masculine right now, and that's not going to work. It's like not oil and water. It's not going to do very well, right?
Right. Well, the word that stuck out to me most in what you just said was devotee. And there is a big difference in the word devotee and the concept of honoring than there is in weakness or submission, losing. And we've been groomed to think that if we are in a more passive, less active role, then we are weak, because we always have to be the penetrating one who takes action and makes decisions. And there is a time and place for that. Certainly, we need that energy to move things forward. And what you're talking about is that there was a lack of polarity, which is oil and water, which is a same charge, a negative and a negative charge, or a positive and a positive charge, right? In order for there to be polarity and attraction, there have to be two opposite charges at play. And so while a lot of masculine energy can be great in certain scenarios, when we're talking about the context of a romantic partnership, if there isn't polarity, then the relationship shifts into becoming something else, maybe colleagues, maybe friends, any other number of setups, but not sexually charged, attracted, passionate lovers. And so in the context of keeping romance alive, there has to be polarity. And it doesn't always mean that the man has to exude masculine energy and the woman feminine energy. It just means that there has to be enough of a dance and intuition about oneself and the other to see how one is to shift within the dynamic that's at play in the relationship.
Wow, that's, it's so interesting to think about it through the lens of positive and negative charge. Because I think that's also something that we don't talk about at all, right, in our culture. Can you go a little bit more into how one would actually, on purpose, be aware of this process, and then what can be done to cultivate enough of the positive and negative charge, right, for the attraction to spark, and then once that's there, how to really amplify it, turn it up, enhance it so that it's crazy off the charts.
Absolutely. First, I think it's important to be aware of the difference between a balanced feminine and masculine energy, and then a feminine and masculine energy that is contorted. And so when we look at our larger landscape, the masculine energy that is contorted is one of competition without the sense of progression, competition to cut each other down, directness to be better than. We're looking at all of these convoluted forms of masculine energy. And when we look at the convoluted form of feminine energy, it is sort of complete indifference. It can tend to become attributes of jealousy, attributes of neediness. And so that is not what we call the divine feminine and divine masculine at play. And so when we're looking at this from its purest form, it's, again, that being directive and being a safe container as far as the masculine goes, and being receiving and creative as far as the feminine goes. And so the first thing I'll say about how to make that practical is tuning into the body. So what is happening in the body? Because, filtering everything through the mind doesn't always give us the answers we're looking for. But asking the question, all right, what sensations am I feeling in my body right now? For me, and this might be similar for you, when I was in my sort of contorted masculine overdrive, my chest would close up. I'd become really short of breath, and my body, I would have a forward-leaning carriage because I was so off into the future. I was not in the present moment. And the true masculine is present, is ever present to everything. And so I would start to notice my physiology, and my head would lean forward, my body would lean forward, my chest was closed, my stomach was clenched, and my jaw was clenched. And so that would let me know, before I could have the thought, I'm in my masculine, I wouldn't think that. I think, oh, wow, what's happening in my body right now? Is there a way I can soften? And softening is the feminine. So can I take a deep breath? Can I allow my jaw to drop? And can I move it around? Can I move my body and stretch and do some nonlinear movement? Because that allows a balance of the feminine to come in as well, because the masculine is very linear. Now, can I just sort of shake and move my body around? And that creates a balance when people are finding that there may be an overdrive of masculine energy. Now, on the flip side of that coin, if we're in a place of perhaps complacency, indifference, neediness, jealousy, then it can really be helpful to call in some of our more divine masculine energy. And that means, okay, what can I do? Can I do some linear movement right now that will help my body take a shape and form? Maybe it's something like a correctly formed push-up. Maybe it's something like doing correctly formed lunges. Can I create a little bit of structure in my day? Can I create a morning and an evening routine that allow me to have a container to flow within? Can I put some, can I infuse my day with some precision and directness in my speech, in how I make an ask for something? And practicing with that as really pragmatic and practical ways to balance our energy.
It's interesting because I work with the nervous system, right? And from a performance lens, I'm the expert there. And I'm going to tell you, had no tie of what you just tied together for me, had no indication that when we're in this very tense kind of posture, that we're also in that tight masculine energy. And there is no softness in that place. And that tension coming through the nervous system and the mind, I think, keeps us from being able to soften and allow those triggered aspects of us to loosen, so that we don't splash on each other and now, right, are so far distant that we have to come back later and apologize that our small self took us into crazy.
Right.
I mean, truly, I would never have considered that when I get in my hard ass, I really just simply need to flow.
And
That's a simple tool.
Yes.
To soften. Oh my gosh.
And that's a great way to put it. Flow, like flow in the body, just kind of sort of moving the arms around, allowing the breath to flow. And, something I want to add to that is we're human. There are going to be times we drop into the small self where we say things we didn't want to say, do things we didn't want to do. And coming back to that divine masculinity through a sense of integrity is what allows us to live into the fullness and richness of our human experience. And what I mean when I say that is, when we've done something that felt out of alignment, we can always come back around and restore integrity by acknowledging what happened and the impact of what happened, and then giving our word to something new. And I borrow on this from Landmark, this concept of restoring integrity and acknowledging everything that was there. And that is the masculine coming back into alignment, and allowing us to live out as humans without needing to watch our every step all the time, and also live in alignment.
Man, I love too the availability of humor for that. I laugh often at myself as I bump into the places within me that are still at times, creating small self effects, and it's just fun, right? To laugh at it through the lens of awareness and go, oh, that was pretty good.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay. So understanding a bit more about the masculine and feminine aspects, and in this lens of what I call divine masculine, divine feminine, how then, as we begin to understand that, and as we begin to oscillate between and really in real time, in a sort of facile kind of nature of simply allowing that to be present, how to on purpose enhance it, how to work with it at a more aware level to amp it up or strengthen it, so to speak.
So working with masculine and feminine energy, the first bit of this is awareness. Being aware, and again, going back to that archetype of mad scientist, and I say mad scientist meets little kid, where the little kid is always asking, but why? But why? Tell me how this works. And the mad scientist is always tinkering, as a way to understand his or her hypothesis. And so the first bit here is putting on that cap and having a sense of curiosity and a sense of humor. I mean, really, a sense of humor about this, like you said, is going to make this exploration all the more fun. I am not of the belief that this has to be hard or challenging all the time. There will certainly be moments of challenge, and there can be a lot of pleasure in this. So building an awareness, and the first thing I say to people is, can you, even for a short amount of time, just observe yourself with no intention to fix or change or do or adjust, right? Because we're so often want to roll our sleeves up and change things about ourselves. So can we just, for a short amount of time, observe what is happening and take notes on it? So even for a week, observe, okay, here's how I felt when I woke up. Here's the first thing I did. Here's what I thought. Here was how I made the coffee. I made the coffee in a rush and I dropped the mug and the mug broke everywhere. Okay, so was I in the pursuit of doing, which is, can be a masculine attribute of action and completion? Was there a contortion in my energy there? And was I in overdrive? And that's how we're going to gather the richness of this data to then see, one, how we're being, and then two, where we would like to make some adjustments for the growth and expansion of ourselves and for everyone around us. Awareness, observation are two big things there. And then asking, okay, how do we want to make shifts and how can we put that into play?
So could you maybe go, okay, in this I'm seeing the word evaluation phase. So I'm evaluating, kind of my state of being, how I was laughing because I'm watching me boil over the cacao on the stove because I'm multitasking while I'm making my sacred drink. And I'm just like, you're kidding. You did it again. And I realize that this aspect of me who needs to get stuff done doesn't allow the sacredness of being present with that beautiful thing that I'm making, right? That I'm so excited about having. And so, but if I look at it through the lens of evaluation and I go, okay, maybe could I use like what percentage of the time am I noticing that doer in me is the predominant aspect, right? Does percentage of time work, or is that going a little too much into the mind? Yeah.
Well, what I'll say is, for people who are trying this for the first time, use what works. We have access to certain tools and certain ways of thinking, and while looking at things through the current lens may be something of a limiting factor, if it's going to start us on the path to further exploration and evolution, then by means, put a percentage. You say, hey, okay, so today in my journal at the end of the day, I feel, exhausted and overrun. And my perception of the day was I was in my masculine overdrive for about 80% of the day, right? This is all subjective data collection anyway. And then as we start with that, we can start to expand on our tools for how we're, considering these things. And, one other gauge I use is asking the question in the present moment. One, am I here right now? Am I really here with what I'm doing? Two, how do I feel in my body? Do I feel constricted and tight? Are my shoulders shrugged? Is my neck crinked to the side, or do I feel relaxed?
Uh-huh.
Is my tummy expanded out because there is just such a free range and flow of my breath? Do I perceive that it's acceptable to slow down? Do I feel worthy of slowing down for a moment? Because a lot of this, especially for powerful women, is tied to a sense of worthiness and enoughness.
Mm-hmm.
We've been taught to think that if we're not doing and achieving and overcoming, then we're not worthy, productive beings. So this is a very deep inquiry that we're talking about here.
Can you talk about? I'm just so laughing because I've just recently come through this phase that you're talking about of am I producing enough to feel like I've contributed well, and I just laugh. But can you tie the physicality to this? Because what I watch, for me, it was what I thought was tied to my military posture. Right, I suck my stomach in. I've got 8-pack abs. Well, I have them because I've sucked my stomach in for 30 years. But what that did was it didn't allow for what you just talked about of this open, relaxed richness. And so I wonder, and of course that shuts down the breath too, because you don't breathe in diaphragmatically. You move your breath up to your chest when you're keeping your abs locked down. So I wonder about the tie of the tight controlling holding of torso with this masculine proving worth by doing, right? Getting shit done. Talk about that, please.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I can relate to you 100%. So there's so many different things I can say about this. You said the word control and tight, and that is what is happening in the body. And the question that I ask myself and others is, what are we afraid of losing control of? Like, what is really on the other side of the holding, the tight clenching in the stomach? And there are a lot of factors at play here, especially for women. There's almost constantly a sucking in of the stomach because we've been told that it's attractive to have a tight, flat tummy. And anything other than that will lose love, will lose affection. And then, what that means to our brains is we'll be kicked out of the tribe, we won't have love, and we'll die. So I draw out that scenario, as crazy as it seems, because that's what's actually happening in the brain. That's what's happening, is that there is always a fear of loss of love, rejection, being kicked out. And so we keep a constriction in our bodies as a way to have a perceived sense of control over our very safety, our very well-being, our very livelihood. So I could understand why we've adapted that way as intelligent beings. And what that limits us in is everything. Because we know that this concept of flow that is so wildly talked about comes in the letting go and in the surrender. And when we think of that from, even a sexual perspective, what happens in orgasm but surrender and letting go, a complete release. And so again, coming back to a physiological practice or an embodied practice, starting to take diaphragmatic breaths where we're pushing down with the diaphragm when we breathe, such that our abdomen expands out. Instead of our chest and shoulders coming up the way we see most people take deep breaths, pushing out with the belly. And you'll almost feel a nice light pressure in the chest because you're pushing with the diaphragm, you're expanding out. And that one practice in and of itself can make all of the difference in, internally and as it relates to how we're operating in our external world.
And a lot of my work is focused on breath, right? To me, breath, it's the first thing and the last thing we do as we come in and leave this experience. And it's the foundation of everything, right? Consciousness rides the breath. Yeah. And, I think about women in particular and orgasm and the tight, tense control that we hold. And, the number of women who say, I simply can't have an orgasm. I know that a lot of that is tied to breath and to tension, right?
Yes.
And so if you said, okay, you just said, let's breathe diaphragmatically. Let's begin to relax that torso, the tension in the solar plexus and in the sacral plexus. And let's see how often we're carrying that tension, right? Because generally it's there 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so it's a good awareness tool to begin to use to say, okay, if I'm carrying that tension there, and just say in the abs, I'm also carrying that tension systems wide.
Yes.
So it's in my jaw, it's in my neck, it's in my shoulders. And if you're breathing up into the chest, you're 20,000, 25,000 breaths a day here causing tension headaches, right? Or tension processes, and tension with others. And so the awareness, right, of that allows one to relax it over and over and over again so that it knows the difference between tension and relaxation, right?
Yes.
And so first and foremost, breath. But what else, from an embodied perspective, would you say would be another thing to pay attention to kind of show yourself the state of being in that tense masculine or in that open kind of trusting flow posture?
Yes. So the question I ask first is what is causing my body to tense in the first place? Right? So what is the thing that precedes the tension at all? And for most people, it is not feeling safe, a lack of a sense of safety. Now, to our cognitive brain, that doesn't make any sense because we might say, in my home, I have a roof over my head, I have food in my refrigerator, thankfully, for all of these things. Why shouldn't I feel safe? However, for so many of us, especially those who have experienced any form of trauma over time and in those formative childhood years, safety was completely stripped away. And so we've not learned how to rehabituate into a safe physiological state that truly feels safe to express and be as it is in natural form. So one practice that I take on myself often and that I share with others is once you're in that diaphragmatic breathing and the body gets the message, okay, I'm safe to be here, I'm not running from a lion, then putting your hands on the body so that you can feel the presence of your own touch and the weight of your own touch. And this is sort of both the masculine containing touch and the feminine nourishing touch. And saying, I am safe. I am safe. I am okay. I am safe to be here. And observe how the body just melts into that. It's as if you're being held by someone else in a way that, you can release anything. And the cool thing here is we can hold that space for ourselves. So starting to put hands on the body in any intuitive place. A lot of times for me, it goes to the chest and the womb area. And then also crossing the body. So crossing with arms, squeezing the arms, because this puts us back into a whole brain state. A lot of times when we're feeling emotionally or physiologically unsafe, we lose our brain function, a lot of our brain function. And so coming back and rubbing the arms with the opposite hands brings us back into whole brain state. And again, pairing that with I am safe, I'm okay to be here, everything's going to be okay, then allows our entire system and being to reintegrate and come back into a sense of wholeness.
I think it's interesting because I think about how I would have responded to this suggestion from you before I understood that I had this control, this kind of tight control around myself. I would have thought you were absolutely crazy. And even me thinking I'm not safe makes no sense. So I wonder, for anyone who is like me, right? I wonder if by doing that, right, just simply by doing that and feeling into what does that feel like to you? Are you right? Are you judging it that this bad shit, crazy stuff, Micra, right? Or
Right.
is it, wow, that's actually interesting, and I do feel, right, strong, soft hands holding me, and I do feel a sense of comfort, and as opposed to this is stupid. Why am I doing this? Do you know what I mean? To kind of
Yes.
gauge where you are in this unconscious process, because for people who feel like they got it all together, they don't have any idea that this is even an issue.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Right?
And so
you don't know what you don't know.
exactly. Let's remove the even the chances that this could be woo-woo for a second. And let's just do a science experiment, right? Because those who are very analytically driven and evidence-based thinkers, beautiful mindset to have, by the way. Let's just run a science experiment. Let's observe in a moment of tension or stress, how do I feel in my body right now? Okay, I'll take notes. I'm clenching here, my jaw's tight. I feel like I could rip someone's head off right now. List it out. And then let's do a practice. Let's put our hands on ourselves. Okay, I don't even have to say anything. Let me just move my hands around my body. Let me put my hands on my womb. Let me just rub and see what happens. And let me hold this for a moment and close my eyes and just take those diaphragmatic breaths in and out. And take a few minutes with this, and then come back and collect that evidence again. Collect that data. See if you feel differently or not. And ask, through what lens are you collecting this data? Is it through the lens of the critic and the cynic? Or is it through the lens of the curious mad scientist meets little child? Because that's going to determine the output as well.
Right.
And in that sense, we don't even have to go into the realm of, oh, I'm so safe. I love this. This is sacred. We can say, hey, I am just hardcore doing a science experiment here. I'm collecting data. That's it. Let me see how I feel.
Yes. And I love that, right? Because we're all so unique and we're all doing life differently. And so for me, I go, let's not polarize into anything. Let's be curious. Now I do most of the time sit in this childlike wonder, and just go, what if, right? Because I don't have a clue most of the time until I do. And so I do invite everyone to simply, if it's available at all, to simply play with it, to see how can I learn more about who I am in many of the situations that I find myself in life, where I've been contracted or combative or controlling or separate, basically. And Lee, I'm laughing because we initially decided we were going to talk about Tantra in modern life, but for my knowing, until you actually have an awareness, until I actually have an awareness of who I am and how I show up, I don't know that Tantra can even make sense, because it's not looked at through a complex systems lens of wholeness. It's looked at through, I'm going to do this strategy to get X outcome, as opposed to what does any of this even mean?
Right.
Right.
Yes.
I'm so fascinated by all of this and how it really is weaving a complex systems tale, also through an epigenetics lens of what are we actually passing down through our lineage transgenerationally. If I am not connected to my sensuality, my sexuality, the pleasure that this human experience can provide me, if I'm not cultivating that, if I'm not teaching that to my darling children, if I'm instead telling them to be ashamed of their bodies and cover them up because it's a terrible thing, I'm now going to send that down into the future generations. And we're all going to be thinking that it's a terrible thing to be connected, to be loving, to be nurturing and touching and sensual and pleasure seekers. There's nothing wrong with that, right?
Right.
And so I love the conversation because we have an opportunity to go, what do I believe around this? What have I taught my children through my examples? And one of the interesting things I'll share is in my former marriage, it wasn't okay to ever not have clothing on in front of children. It was something to hide, right? Because they'll get the wrong messages if mommy is not clothed properly. And it always bugged me because I didn't understand why that was a big deal. If I didn't make it a big deal, they wouldn't make it a big deal. But I went ahead and I did that. And it took me years truly to recognize that my children also had somewhat of an unconscious belief, and we've talked about this now, and so I can say this, that it really is proper to cover up. It's proper. Well, is it? And so now we can begin to ask ourselves, who taught me that it wasn't okay for me to be naked? That's how I came in, and that's certainly how I'm going out.
Right.
And so now I got to cover everything up because it's not okay, right? It's things like that I think conversations like this can begin to open wider windows of perspective, so that we can all start going, oh my goodness, why do I believe any of the things I believe, right?
Absolutely.
And then really kind of cultivate a new lens to go, how would I explore being more present with myself, my physicality, my sensuality, my sexuality. I think the conversations can't go anywhere until we actually know why we believe what we believe. Do we still believe it? Do we still want to believe it? Is it serving us? Or is there a new way to explore being more sensual in this body? One of the things that Dan said to me, he said, have you ever done any, and this is a few years ago, have you ever done anything for pleasure? Do you have a massage simply for pleasure? And I'm like, no, why would I do that? No, I do massage to unstick my muscles and to do some energy work at a deeper level. I've never even considered getting a massage for pleasure. And he's like, you might want to because it's super fun. And so I got his massage body worker. And I said, okay, here's my intention. I'm just going to feel pleasure. I'm like, I don't know how to do that. But she actually was able to show me what soft, strong pleasure meant, because my mind was out of the way and I was simply feeling how good it felt instead of having a purpose, and even pleasure wasn't the purpose. But for me, in my concrete thinking, I had to go, what does pleasure feel like? And it shocked me that I didn't even know what that meant.
Wow.
I know, right? This is the thing. I mean, I think when we look through the lens that we've been conditioned through, we can't see it any other way until we allow ourselves to begin to suspect that there might be a different way to see it.
Right. I acknowledge you for that, for going on that exploration. And there's so many people that are in the same boat. I was there as well. Everything had to be for utility.
Yes.
There had to be a usefulness to it. And it's interesting because look at the way we show up in relationship with others. A lot of the reason why we're in the state that we're in as a collective is because we have been viewing relationships and connections for the purpose of utility. What can this person do for me? What can I gain from this? And that is precisely because we haven't cultivated the ability within to say, can I do this simply because I enjoy it?
Yes.
Can I do this to feel pleasure, to feel, can I do this without attachment to anything, whether that's pleasure or utility or whatever? And then the deeper inquiry there is, have I been taught, and do I think I deserve to have that kind of experience?
Yeah, and that's I can tell you that's something that I am grateful that I now recognize. I don't have to prove my value by my constant production, and I don't have to, behind the scenes of my mind, be wondering what I'm going to get out of that. I had no idea that I was even doing that until I wasn't doing it anymore.
Right.
And the term compersion, Dan loves this. This is like favorite, right? His favorite thing is, I'm going to do this because you're feeling good and I'm feeling good, and I can care about how I can benefit you. I mean, I love that. And I never looked through that lens. I didn't even know what that meant.
Yeah.
And it's such a joy now to truly know what that is. And I so hope that our conversation is beneficial to anyone who has sat in our shoes, right? And who I think can have hope that there is so much more connectedness and so much more ability to have pleasure, to give pleasure. To just ask the question, what does pleasure mean to me?
Yes.
And maybe that's a conversation that we have another time to continue this, because I love learning with you. It's just such a gift. And I'm going to put your free gift back up again, untamedintimacy.com. And I can tell listeners, if you've continued with us, you will definitely learn from a master in this master class. And wow, join us. I think it'll be a ton of fun.
Oh, we're going to have a lot of fun.
And here's your website, leenoto.com. And I'll put these in the show notes as well. So Lee, thank you again. Oh my heavens. I grow each time we're together and look forward to the next.
Likewise. It's been such a pleasure and joy to play.
Happy day. Love you.
Love you.